So yeah, welcome everyone. Thanks for coming here. Just a little bit about myself. As context, as Chantal mentioned, I'm a product designer here at the Social Innovation Hub. I have experience in building and scaling a lot of tech products in Canada, Europe, and the Middle East. I just love like building things and working with people, help them see their dreams realized. And yeah, I mentor Product Calgary here as well. And I just found a good food. Actually, tonight I'm going to check out this Italian-Japanese fusion restaurant, which seems like an interesting mix. So if you have any good food recommendations, send them my way. And yeah, just like having good company and being outdoors. So yeah, just love being here in Calgary and being part of the team here. Today, we're talking about testing. But yeah, as Chantal mentioned, we have a Q&A as well here. So here's a QR code with a drop-in Q&A. You can also upvote questions as we go along. At the end, I'll also have the link available for you to open up and respond. But if anything happens, like comes up while I'm discussing, you can just drop them in there, and then we'll get to it at the end of the presentation. So translating vision to action. This topic came about as I was just working with a few people in the hub, and I think our hub especially is focused on more early stage companies. And so there's just a need I see for having just more strategic thinking around how to actually test an idea and expand an existing product. So I'm just going to share from my own experience in going through this repeatedly, some of the frameworks and the methods I use to launch and grow new products so that you can be more empowered. We have a workshop that's more hands-on next week, and then I'll also be making a sort of resource package that's more in-depth for members of the hub for best practices when they're doing certain research methods so that you can be better empowered to really go and do this on your own as well. Today, I'm going to talk about some of the problem with MVP development, the idea of creating a hypothesis log and using the scientific method to drive your testing and research, how to choose an actual testing method that helps you get more confidence about your business model and your product, depending on your stage of your business. And then looking quickly at some ethical data practices to ensure that we're just keeping the best standards around data protection and privacy. So MVPs have been around, or the topic of MVPs have been sort of in the popular domain for about 15 years. I think it was around 2011 where Eric Ries wrote this book, The Lean Startup, and this idea of rapid testing and iteration of ideas to help you gain more confidence around your business model. And I think it was sort of led to a lot of boom in this startup culture, I think, especially around technology. But I think there's a bit of a disillusionment around this of like, okay, if I have an idea, I can just go build an MVP and then test it and everything will be great. But in reality, I think it's a lot more messy than you may expect. And this is actually maybe a clean version of how you get from your idea to MVP. And there's a lot that can go wrong along this way. And there are a few issues with just going straight from your idea to development of your product, which I will get into. Just take some time here. Okay. So some of the problems that even if they're meant to be lean, building an MVP or a first version of your product or service often takes time to build, launch, and get data back. And there's a lot that goes into the MVP that is not tested before it's launched in many cases. And so it also becomes difficult to sort of work backwards and see what it attributed to its success or failure. There's what I call the product hero complex, which is like as you're developing, the longer you take to develop something, the more pressure is placed on that one launch to really save the business or make the business case for the business. During development as well, of the product, whether it's software or otherwise, once you're building a solution, it becomes really tempting to try to de-risk the business by adding more functionality in order to really make it more attractive. But this really bloats your test or bolsters your product, which limits like the ability to really work backwards. And what I mean by that is that, say you spend a few months or even, I don't know, a month building a working product. If it fails, it's hard to work backwards to know what part of the product, was it a certain feature, was the launch strategy, what part of this led to the failure of the launch. And even if it's successful, because sort of everything's packaged together, it can be unclear to really parse that out and know what worked well for that launch and where you actually go from there to really improve the product. And so one methodology that I've used before comes from this book called The Right It. And it's also an older book, came around the same time as the Lean Startup book. But it's been, I think, the most useful book for me in navigating early stage product development and testing. And so a lot of the principles that I'm leaning on comes from here, and I've used it in real practice as well. And I'm going to be sharing some examples. It's more focused on early stage development here, but at the end of the presentation, I'm also going to touch on sort of later stage iteration of an existing product and how you approach that. But one of the things that is mentioned in this book, which is very accurate, and what I'm highlighting here about this sort of MVP issue, is that the success of your business comes down to more than one factor. There's a lot of different things that play into the success of a launch of a product, of a business. And you have to really get them all right for it to be really a true success. And there's something called the law of market failure in business, which is that the market is trying to pull you down towards failure, and the odds are you will fail in building a business. And because a lot has to go right for that for success to happen. And you really have to work against this law strategically to really build a successful business. For example, if you have the right product at the right time with the right distribution and the right team, and et cetera, then you maybe have some level of success. But the right product at the right time with the wrong distribution or the wrong time has lead to failure, right? So some products are before their time. Some products just have trouble reaching their audiences. And there are more than just these sort of 4 areas that I highlighted that can affect the success of your business. And if you look at this from a mathematical standpoint, every new factor you add that affects your success or failure means that there are 2 to the power of n minus 1 ways to fail and only 1 way for it to succeed. So the more complex your equation is, the more difficult it is to sort of get all those pieces right. And typically an MVP only focuses on that product piece, maybe distribution too, but misses out on some of the other pieces. And so I'm going to suggest a way to really de-risk this equation in your business as well, so that you can be more successful at launch and help you build a more successful business. My animations are a bit off here. Okay, let's get through this. Okay, so one way to start is starting with core hypotheses. So for these assumptions, for these different pieces of your business that have to be true, there's an underlying assumption that you are making about your business that has to be true for your business to succeed or continue its growth trajectory. So say I'm assuming that my product will be successful. I have some sort of assumption that people will be willing to pay for it, that it will meet their needs, that they'll be satisfied by the experience, right? Each of these hypotheses about my business has an underlying risk associated with it. So if this hypothesis is not true, how much does that impact my business? How risky is this assumption? Along with that is an uncertainty. So as I get more testing done and I evaluate this business model, hopefully my uncertainty will decrease as I gain more evidence to support or refute these hypotheses about the business. And so with the risk and the uncertainty together form a sort of urgency score for each hypothesis that says like, okay, what is the urgency that I need to get more data or information about this hypothesis? This is quite high level, so I'm going to use a real life example to help us sort of get our minds around this. So let's imagine, oh my gosh, okay. I'm just going to do this then, okay. Let's imagine that you want to open a flower shop and you're trying to see if it's a good idea or not. Okay, so I just listed out some hypotheses I would have about the success of my flower business from different levels. So I'm going to assume that there's enough demand for another flower shop. I'm assuming that I can make flower arrangements that people want to buy, that I can find a provider who's going to sell me the flowers, yada, yada, yada. So they're just like 5 I made on the top of my head. There could be more. But you can see here, each of these sort of hypotheses about the business has an associated risk score. So if I'm not able to find a reliable source of flowers, then it's a pretty high risk to the business. In this case, I just said, okay, maybe there's a low uncertainty. Maybe I've done some homework and I've found some providers. So I'm not too worried that that's going to kill the business. But I haven't really done much demand testing. So there's a high risk that there's like no demand for another flower shop. And my uncertainty is high, which means that there's an urgency around this that, okay, if I want to gain confidence that I can build this flower business, then I need to get more data around this hypothesis to lower that uncertainty. And then you can see here, I also have tags that I added around like the focus, just to say, okay, is this the hypothesis around the demand for the service? Is it around partnership? Is it around supply, economics? There could be more, but it's helpful to know like what area of the business you're testing. And this is sort of what makes it that a business equation, right? So you have the right supplier with the right customers, with the right partnerships, yada, yada. That's what leads to the successful business at the end. And so you can list these out. And once you have a list, then you can sort them by urgency. So here I have like a ranked list of hypotheses that I can then target individually from the top down and say, okay, for me to de-risk this business, I need to start with analyzing demand for my flowers. And then I need to look at my margins. Am I actually able to sell at a good price, like based on how much I pay for them? And then all the way down. In this case, one example, so the bottom one for partnership. Say I'm looking at partnering with Uber or other delivery partners to distribute my flowers. The risk score is low because if I don't partner with them, there are other ways to distribute my goods, right? Maybe I start my own delivery, maybe I'm more regional, or I have franchise locations. And the uncertainty might be low, like I imagine most providers would want me to be on their platform, right? So it's not really urgent for me to test, but it may be interesting for me to still explore. But this is sort of a way to sort of start with your testing so that you know what you want to actually test with your business. So let's take the first one here. I'm going to dig into it a bit deeper. So let's look at this hypothesis that there's enough demand in my city for another flower shop. This is maybe a good start for knowing what you want to test. But it's still like a big hypothesis that is not easily testable without maybe some investment. So one way to break this down or to see the flaws is to understand what does sufficient demand in this case really mean? How much is sufficient, right? If I'm saying there's demand in my city, in the city of Calgary, it might be hard to test if there's enough demand in Calgary for another flower shop, right? And then in that case, even what is another flower shop, like what is my value proposition? What is my unique approach here? So one way to sort of break this down is to take this through this format called the XYZ hypothesis. So you format your hypothesis in the format of X% of Y will Z. So in this case, I'll start with maybe 1% of Calgarians will buy my flowers on a quarterly basis. That then make it like more approachable, but even that's too big, right? So you want to sort of narrow it down so that you have a really testable hypothesis. In this case, maybe we could say I'll assume 1% of my neighbors will buy my flowers. Now that's something that you can actually action on. And there are multiple ways that you could test that by going door to door, right? Buying flowers from a different shop and trying to sell them, or having a booth at the local farmers market, just like a pop-up shop, or putting up a table at a garage sale, right? And seeing how many people buy. So the numbers here, maybe 1%. I just sort of put that as like a placeholder, and as you test, that you may or may not reach that, but the idea is to start somewhere. And now I have a hypothesis that I can move forward. I can choose a test, how to actually want to test this, and then I can actually measure the results and make an educated decision afterwards. And one way to structure this is something called an experiment card, where you list your assumption that you're making, your hypothesis, and then your test setup, the target metric, and then your decision. So after the test happens, what will be the result? So in this case, my assumption is that there's enough demand in my neighborhood for my flower business. My hypothesis could be, if I knock on 100 doors, then 2 of them will purchase some flowers from me. So the test setup could be, okay, I walk around and I check, I have to go down to doors, and then my metric is how many of them actually buy like a package of flowers. So you state the background, you make this sort of hypothesis testable, then you plan the details, and at the bottom it says here, it's kind of hard to read, but it says like, if the test succeeds, what will I do? If the test fails, what will I do? And if it's inconclusive, what will I do? And basically what you're doing here is you're holding yourself sort of accountable to the results of the test. So let's say you have 5% of people buy. Now, does that mean you want to go buy, spend your life savings to buy a flower shop? Maybe not yet. Maybe you want to do an additional test and expand your reach, right? So it's also important to plan out, okay, if I'm doing this smart test on demand in my neighborhood, how will I hold myself accountable to the results? The third picture here that didn't load, I guess, is an analysis card, but it basically takes the results and the data and helps you analyze it and then make a decision based on the result and move forward. When you're choosing a testing method, I tend to look for these targeted tests that you're testing a specific sort of aspect of your business. I like to look at 3 things: that it's targeted, right? So in this case, you want to choose a sample size that is representative of your market. So a decent size, but reachable. So you don't have to spend a lot of effort to actually reach them. So in this case, either finding where people would congregate often, or going door to door, or doing flyers, or wherever you want to reach them, but find that balance so that it's a manageable test. I also tend to bias towards the low hours or low money to data, especially early on in testing a business idea. You want to spend a day or less to try to get results. And there are, with these targeted methods, that's the real benefit, is that you can really do a bunch of repeated tests to do, okay, I want to test demand, I want to test supply, I want to test partnership, right? And then you're not investing days or even weeks of time to really get that rapid feedback. The third one here is skin in the game. I think this is often overlooked with testing, but the quality of your data that you get back depends heavily on how much you ask from your participants. So if you're sending out a survey and people say, yes, I would buy flowers from a local provider, that doesn't mean they actually will, right? There's a difference between what people say they will do and what actually ends up happening. And so one thing that you can try to bias towards is some sort of either asking something from your participants, whether that's a down payment, whether that's a deposit, whether that's a 30-minute sales call if you're doing a business, a B2B test, right? Whether that's actually buying the flowers. So you maybe I buy it from an existing flower shop and they buy it from me. Okay, they actually paid money. That's a better metric that they actually would buy from me than a survey or even just a conversation, right? Even like an email address or phone number is has more skin in the game, that helps you also get better confidence that what they're actually doing is indicative of their future behavior. So that being said, I'll talk about some creative testing methods. I mentioned a few for the flower shop, but these are some ones that I've actually tried for business ideas. One is called a smoke test or a fake door test, which is where you test the level of interest by pretending the product exists and seeing if people would actually buy it. So one example is you're in a restaurant, you put an item on the menu and you see if people will order it. Like it's not really there for sale, but if you see people ordering it, you can say, oh, sorry, we don't have that in stock or whatever, and then maybe give them a discount or some sort of compensation. I've done this one where in my last job, we were testing out a online pharmaceutical, like non-prescription medication shop. And so we built an online store with products from a competitor that we rebranded. And we built it in a day or two. And then we launched some ads. Within a few days, we could see what people were adding to their cart, what people were checking out with. And if they went through the checkout process and actually put in their credit card and had that purchase intent, then we would send them a gift card. We'd say, basically, we're not ready yet, but here's a gift card for up for Amazon or whatever. And that's a way to say, okay, people actually wanted to buy this product. They actually put in the cart, they actually checked out. And we were able to get a lot of data there about what items people were putting in their cart, what type of products people were spending the most time on. And then we were able to move forward knowing, okay, we're able to target these specific products because they were the most purchased, right, in our fake door test. One fun example of this comes from someone who was building a physical product. So he was building a new hook for, I think it was for keys and for jackets at your door. And he basically, I think it spent $600 total, but he made some prototypes and then bought an IKEA uniform and made a small display inside the IKEA of the product and put his product there. And then he would go to the checkout and see if anybody actually put in their cart and try to buy the product. And IKEA didn't know about this, but so they would try to scan the product at the checkout, and they'd be like, oh, I don't think this is in our inventory. Like, you can just have it for free. And then he would talk to them after, and he's like, yeah, you can have the product for free. I just wanted to see, if people would buy this. So that's a very creative way to sort of, and low risk. He just put it in the store, and he saw that they had a lot of people pick up the product and try to buy it, which is a strong indication that they would buy it if it was like a real product. But I would say that you have to make sure you compensate people if you can't deliver on your promise. Part of the ethical testing, I think, is just like, if you have people go through this method of adding products, checking out, and they actually think they're going to get something, that there needs to be an equivalent compensation to save like your phase, your value, and your brand. But yeah. Some examples is called a provincial test. So that's when you want to launch a new product, but you can test it in an informal context. So these are some real examples as well. Best Buy pitched a 10 at a time with the stores to see if people would want to swap their old electronics for store credit. It took off and it became like a national policy, a national program. Airbnb famously created a website for their apartment when there was an important design conference in town. And they had 3 people book it within a few hours. And they're like, oh, maybe this is a good idea. And they ended up building Airbnb. Tesla made a pop-up showroom out of a storage container that they would just ship around to different locations to see if people would place a deposit on a car. And that's skin in the game, right? It's getting people to place $5,000 for a car is a strong indication that they actually want to buy it. And they would try different locations to know where to place the showrooms. So they use this sort of mobile pop-up showroom to see where they could best launch. And today, especially with technology products, there are a lot of tools out there that help you build a prototype or early version of product in a day or less. So these are just 3 that I've built for testing. These are more solution testing. So when you're building when you get to this stage, ideally you have data around the problem space, and you're confident that the problem exists, and you're just testing different solutions and want to test on different technologies. So I would say this is more of a later stage test if you're testing a certain design or testing a certain integration of your technology. But yeah, there's a lot you can do these days. So for example, we were looking to build a tool that helped e-commerce stores with their refunds and returns, that they would give people store credit for returns and refunds and manage them all in one place. Most e-commerce stores have a pretty hectic return refund management system. So I built like a realistic tool in a few days, and we basically sent out some sales emails and did some fake demos with this product that, well, I guess it did exist, but not to the extent that we were selling it, to see if people would actually buy it. And there was a lot of demand for that sort of product. And we were able to say, come back because people were willing to spend 30 minutes of their time watching our demo. That's pretty good skin in the game, I would say, for testing your idea. And I'm planning on digging into this further in February in our webinar about leveraging modern day tools to actually build and design your product. So that'll be I can go more in depth in that later. But this is a helpful matrix that I've also used. This comes from a course I took, but this does a good job of saying, okay, if you look at your targeted, what you want to actually validate and gain confidence in, which tests are the most appropriate. So if you're looking at the problem to solve and that's where you want to start, you may want to start with a survey or a smoke test like this fake door, or the pre-sales, so doing sales for a product if it's a B2B product before you've actually created it, and seeing what is the open rate for the email, right? What is the response rate to sign up for a demo? As you move down to the right, you can leverage prototypes, product tests, and growth tests are sort of later stage if you're looking to expand your product and optimize. The growth test would be around, okay, what if we change the copy of the website? How does that affect the conversion rate or the checkout rate for the products, right? Or if we change some of the design or the functionality of the application, how does that affect our key metrics around retention and monetization of customers, right? So this is a good matrix that helps you see, okay, which tests may be most appropriate for me given which stage of the business I'm in. And yeah, so as your business gains more confidence and it grows, you have different critical questions or different critical hypotheses. So early on, you're looking at the problem discovery. Then you move to the solution creation, solution distribution, and then optimization. And so each of these will have different hypotheses that you're testing or different risk factors. So early on, it's about, okay, is this really a problem in people's lives? Do we understand the problem? And do we know what the most important problems are? And then we can move to, okay, let's try, our solution. Okay, let's ideate it, let's design it, and let's validate that it actually is meaningful. And then, okay, let's look at distribution. And these are all, intertwined, but typically you follow some sort of process like this. You look at, okay, does their solution bring value to customers? Is it usable? And are they able to find it? And then once you're on the market and you have a working product, then you're looking at, okay, what is the performance of key metrics? What is the customer satisfaction around this? Are they staying around? And are we actually taking the market share and growing over time? And each of these will have different approaches to testing as well. And you also want to have a balanced data set when you're doing this. So especially, this is more of a later stage testing approach. But you want to have observational, well, these four types of data, observational, conversational, testing, surveys, are at your disposal for testing. Observational is really important early on for problem identification. That's when you're observing people's behavior through ethnographic research, or even tracking on a website. When you see like how do people currently address their needs, and even doing observational studies, seeing how people work in their job. For example, if you're trying to build a safety solution for harnessing in window washers, right? Maybe it's, like, observational is a good way to start to see how are people using the current technology and what are their frustrations and how can a solution be made that addresses that. So that can be observational, can be quite applicable in that sort of sense, in that environment. Conversational comes through interviews and different studies. How are people talking about the problem when you ask them about it? What language are they using? Even maybe that can inform how you're marketing the product. And testing is more, once you have a solution in mind, how is it actually performing? How is your design actually being used? Is it actually meeting their needs? Are they actually using it repeatedly? And then surveys is another way to sort of get a higher level view of high level trends and areas of weakness within your product or within the problem space. And this is another matrix that I like. It might be overwhelming, but this is another one that I turn to. So on the left, you can see the 4 stages here of the business stage. So problem, solution, distribution, and optimization. And then at the top, you have these 4 research methods: observational, conversational, testing, surveys. And here, this is somewhat subjective with these stars, but it does show sort of how different research methods typically fit into different stages of the business. So early on, a lot of the research may be observational, conversational, and with some surveys, because you're focused on this problem space and you want to get qualitative and quantitative data and see people in their real environment, right? Depending on what product you're selling. As you move to more of a solution and are testing that, then you're moving more to this testing phase of, okay, is our product usable? And is it, can we actually tweak it over time? And then once you're at tweaking as well, you can also turn to surveys to look at the satisfaction around the product, around so intercept survey is when you intercept people while they're using the product to ask them how easy a certain task was. You might have seen these, like, or they ask you, like, would you recommend this product to someone else? Different ways to, like, catch the user to see, like, how easy was this function to perform? May give you a clues on how to actually improve the product itself. So anyways, this is a helpful matrix as well for getting an idea of what to test for which part of your business. For tools, I just listed some that I've used. So there are a lot of modern day tools out there that can help you perform research, especially if you're building a technical product. Polfish is a survey tool that I've used. They let you send out surveys, so you pay per user, basically, that finishes the survey. And they have a lot of really strong filters. You can do global studies, you can do local studies, you can look for specific job titles, whatever. So that's a really great resource for doing surveys at scale. I would be careful to rely only on surveys, but it's a good start to sort of add to your existing data set. Optimal Workshop and Listna are good ways to test your design. So you're able to basically put designs in front of people, ask them to complete a task, to click through a prototype. It's a way to test your design at scale as well. So you can get hundreds of people to click through your screens to see where they click, what they try to do, where they get stuck. So those are helpful as well for doing later stage design testing. Maze as well also does testing, but it's also just a repository for your research. Same with Dovetail. They're tools that let you track on your studies, your tests, and then have, like, all of that analysis done in one place. And Qualtrics is helpful as well. I think they also have a repository, and they are also a survey tool, although I don't know if they do recruiting like Polfish does. But Optimal Workshop and Listna do recruiting for their studies, so you can just pay per user that goes through your test. Final note here around ethical data collection. So just like 4 principles that are important to consider when you're doing this testing. One is around consent. So especially with digital tests, it's important to have consent present when someone's data is being collected, when you're tracking, especially if you're doing heat map tracking, tracking where they're looking or tracking where their mouse is. It's not, I think, required by law, but it's just a good practice to have so that people know that they're being monitored. Similarly, having some sort of transparency that throughout your application or your website where people can see what metrics are being tracked and for what reason. Security and privacy, making sure that there's effective storage of data and handling of data when you process it and make decisions. And then intention. So when you're making a survey or a study, just being conscious that you assess your intention behind every question. And this is not only a good ethical data practice, but it helps you build just a more streamlined data collection so that you're not collecting more data than you need to make certain focused decisions. Before we get to the Q&A, I wanted to drop in the feedback survey. So that's the end of my presentation. Thanks everyone for your time. If you follow this QR code, you'll be able to answer a quick survey for just what you thought of the material, how applicable it is, and what sort of content you'd like to see in future webinars or workshops. I'll just give a few minutes for that, for people to fill that out. And I can talk a bit about what's coming up next. So in February, it's a bit of a follow-up from this topic, but I'll be doing some workshops around how to leverage modern tools to automate parts of your business and to prototype and test new ideas. So there's a lot of new products, especially with the boosting of AI empowerment. That can be overwhelming. So I'm going to be digging into that, how to actually automate some of your existing processes through modern day technology, and then a workshop around leveraging AI and no code, low code tools to build products. And then the workshop next week, we'll dig into this further. So for those interested, we'll be basically making hypothesis logs in practice and building out tests that address those core hypotheses of the business. So that'll be fun. Okay. Now I'll go to the Q&A and see what's in there. And yeah. What about sending them a PO box to test out the product? Yeah, I would agree. I think this is an example. Well, if you have the product, that's great. Then I think if you know who you're targeting and you have their information, you gathered it in an ethical way, then I think that's a good way to go. Depending on the product, you would want also a way to track or get to know if they actually if they used it, what they thought, get some feedback. If you just send them a box, may not be able to collect much data around if they opened it or what they did after you dropped it on their doorstep or whatever it is. But any other questions from the group here or thoughts? No questions, hey? No. Oh, that's good or bad. Okay, I give one more minute for questions, but if not, I think we can wrap it up. Any last thoughts?